Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Willis Unscripted. As always, I'm your host, Sarah Willis, and today I am joined by a very special guest and a friend of mine, Jean Fott. Jean, hi.
How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Well,
Thank you.
we both wore our jiu-jitsu stuff, and you're in the background with all yours today. Why don't you tell folks how you got started in jiu-jitsu? What do you do? Where you're based out of?
So, what got me into jiu-jitsu? Well, kind of like a lot of people's story. It's kind of like November '93, right? So UFC 1 kind of just shook everything. So at that time, I was like 13, but there wasn't no jiu-jitsu in America, so kind of like it faded away there for a while. And then I was working. I was at like a UFC event, like barbecue type deal. And through a mutual friend, I met a guy named Matt, who was a blue belt under James Foster in Washington State. And then he kind of was like, hey, do you want to like train at my garage at my house? So I was like, I took him up on it like a week later. And I asked him, like, how many people have actually like took you up on this? And he was like, you're the only one. And then I trained with him for a little bit. And then he introduced me to James. And then I started, and then I was under James Foster for the rest of my time. And that was April of 2014, and then I got my black belt from him in West Virginia at my first Grapple for Life event in May of 23.
Wow. Awesome. So that's quite a journey. Yeah. So I guess let's pivot and transitions, because of how I know you is through our friend Adina and that American Foundation for Suicide Prevention and awareness, and specifically with Grapple for Life. Wonderful lady getting us plugged in. She's just making connections left and right, which is so cool. And so I was really struck by your foundation, Grapple for Life. And so just tell us that story. What do y'all do?
So Grapple for Life was created based off of, something that happened to me. So I lost my daughter to suicide in April of 2019. And she was 15 years old. And she was 25 days from her 16th birthday. Obviously, that kind of put my life into turmoil. And it was, I was slowly kind of making my way back. Like, my team really came through with me. People that I trained with at the time, I was a purple belt. And they kind of got me back training. It was more of a closed door environment because I wasn't ready to like deal with people. So it was like really slick group of guys that I was training with, like during non-regular hours. James, my professor, was like, pretty much let us have the academy whenever it was available for us to train. And then slowly it started turning into like open mats and then me resuming normal training. Mm-hmm. So after that, I realized like how much that it helped me through, my depression and my process. So if it helped me, I was like, well, how can I use this to help other people? So May of 2022, we kicked off our first Grapple for Life event. So our mission is basically to utilize the culture of jiu-jitsu, the physical and mental aspects of it, to help support people that have like high risk factors for suicide. So that could be lost survivors, people that are suffering from depression or other type of health issues, and we get them training in approved Grapple for Life facilities. We also provide educational resources and resource material to academies that request it. I've also done like speaking arrangements at like schools, education boards, and other like working with like stakeholders in the community. So it doesn't always have to be related to jiu-jitsu. So it could just be any type of community event where they want someone to talk about it and like some of the information. So we'll do that. And then also working with like the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, because I'm also a board member and the public policy chair for the West Virginia chapter. So we work on like policy changes in like schools and the state and at national level to improve mental health resources and avenues for the community.
Well, that's wonderful. I know jiu-jitsu is, as you said, it helps you get through a whole lot. It's not therapy, of course, but it certainly gives you a community to rally around you, right? I noticed, just full disclosure too here, I've struggled in this aspect. And when I was looking for resources, this has been a little bit ago, it always seemed that there was, which we need for survivors from the war, PTSD. There was always suicide awareness and prevention for them, but I didn't see a whole lot that was out there at the time for just everyday people dealing with these same battles. Did you run into that when you were thinking about starting Grapple for Life?
Yes, actually, that's a very good point, and that is there's a lot of resources for veterans and like first responders and things like that. But we're trying to bridge that gap between them. Like my daughter, like there was no resources for her. So we really focus on that. Now we've had people reach out to us for sponsorships because we do sponsor people. But if it's a veteran or a military personnel or like a first responder, what we'll do is we'll actually do like a soft handoff with an organization that's probably better suited for them because we focus on the other aspect of that, of people that have less options there. Like we've done soft handoffs with like Adopt a Cop, or we'll pass them into a soft handoff to like Mission 22 or like We Defy, who kind of focuses on the military side, and Adopt a Cop obviously with like law enforcement.
Yeah, and those are all wonderful organizations. And I know you mentioned earlier, and I was just wondering what that means is to be a Grapple for Life approved academy. So how does one become an approved academy, or how do you vet to make sure they're going into a safe space? Because that's a big discussion right now, is safe spaces in jiu-jitsu.
Yes. So one, we're gonna look up the academy. We're gonna look up the instructors. We're gonna make sure that there's first, like I know a lot of people don't get into it, but like lineage and making sure that they are actually like who they say they are, right? Because there can be a lot of shady stuff, especially in martial arts. Yeah, we want to make sure that the school is been established for a while and there isn't like a history. We look at reviews also and things like that. We'll personally call the academy and talk to them also, and you just kind of get a feel, tracking. Like when you talk to people, you can kind of get a vibe that way also. And then we're constantly doing follow-ups, all right? So it's not like we get somebody's training and sponsored and then we just let them go. So at least on a monthly basis, we're going to continue talking to the person that we're sponsoring. We're going to be talking to the instructors at the academy, making sure that they're how they're progressing. Are they making it to class twice a week? Have they seen improvements? Has there been decline? We just keep track of that kind of stuff because we want to make sure that there is a continued support structure, and it's not just like here's a sponsorship and then good luck to you and then pop smoke on them.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, because it's easy to throw money at a problem as opposed to helping someone build back their life, so to speak, or to get the skills to venture forth from jiu-jitsu, to maybe get plugged in with a therapist or a great, health community out there to where they can have a different, an extra layer of support. Have you had to, let me think of a way to phrase this. When people apply for your scholarships, is there a certain criteria that person has to meet if there's not an approved academy, those sorts of things? I mean, what does that process look like?
Yeah, so what they do is they can get online or they can contact us and we'll send them an application. And then what the application does is we got to make sure that they fit in under the criteria of, do they have a first high risk factor, right? So have they had a prior attempt? Is there a family history? Are they seeing treatment right now? Let's say maybe they're seeing a therapist or something like that. The therapist will write us a letterhead thing saying they don't have to go into full like disclosure of what they're diagnosed with, but they are letting us know that they are, receiving treatment for whatever diagnosis, which lets us know that they are going through it. We've also had people provide long-term, like, they've been seeing somebody for like 2 years. They've shown us like their inpatient history, especially if it's like a parent with a child. And we stick with the age group between 10 and 34 because 10 and 34 is second leading cause of death between that age group is suicide. So we stick with kind of like the higher risk factor groups.
Yeah. And that's a great point that you bring up with that 10 to 34. I know it's an unfortunate thing as a teacher. I see a lot of that, or students will confide in me over 9 years I've been teaching. It's quite shocking just the amount that young people are struggling with. Do you find that it's parents really reaching out to you to get students plugged in, or are some people feeling comfortable enough to reach out on that, contacting y'all on your webpage for those scholarships and sponsorships?
Yeah, so for the most part, it has been parents. We have had some adults reach out to us that have been sponsored, but I would say probably 80% of our sponsorship so far has been parents reaching out. And
Okay.
kind of like they've went through kind of like what I went through. So when my daughter first told me that she was suffering from like depression and some issues, I was trying to find her a therapist and a counselor, and it was very difficult. Like the waiting periods were long. We're talking like 3 to 6 months, and so I kept expanding the search radius, and it was just delay after delay. Like the mental health field right now is so backlogged. Knowing what I know now, there is so much bureaucratic red tape that therapists and social workers and stuff have to go through with licensing in each state, and a lot of this red tape needs to get cut out so these waiting periods aren't so long for people.
Yeah,
That said, the
it's a
parents
tragedy.
will reach out, and yes. One thing that has been real positive is like looking at who referred them. A lot of times it's been counselors or therapists that have actually been referring them to us. So the word has gotten out in the mental health field that we are available for them. So like the last sponsorship that we actually had, it was his counselor that actually referred him to us, or referred him to go to our website. And he is now training at an academy.
Oh, that's fantastic. And it's disheartening and it's encouraging all at the same time that I'm thinking back to my own mental health journey of it was so, maybe it's down here in the South, but I don't think it's just a Southern thing where parents usually want to, it seems like, oh, you're fine, just walk it off, rub some dirt in it, you'll be okay. But now it seems like you're saying 80% of your scholarship applicants, it's coming from parents who are really involved and not wanting to ignore the problem. But then there's all that red tape of how do you find those resources if you're in a mental health, resource desert. We talk a lot about food deserts, but what about mental health resource deserts? Is there anything you want to, because I know you're with the suicide prevention, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. What have you seen? I know you're in West Virginia, I'm here in Mississippi, quite a distance, but what have you seen just working with that foundation of how have attitudes changed, improved? Are the stats still on the rise as they were when, I was first paying attention to it? What are you noticing on the ground?
So what I'm noticing is the view and stigma around suicide and like mental health is making a shift, right? It's making a shift towards more of a positive, to where people are more open to talk about it. It's not such a taboo topic anymore. So you're seeing a good push for that, but you're also still seeing a lot of old mentality, especially in the legislative world, right? So when I've talked to lawmakers, there's still a lot of old school lawmakers that are still in office that are still under that impression, like, it's tighten up your bootstraps and kind of get over it type deal. They still have a lot of the old mentality thinking of the myths of like, if you talk about it, it'll make people do it, which is a big false fallacy that's been out for a long time, and people still believe a lot of the old myths about mental health and suicide, even in the legislative world where you're dealing with lawmakers and stuff like that. So you're having to educate them also while you're trying to get bills passed. That's been positive. Unfortunately, the numbers have either been steady or the same, or kind of going up and down. But there hasn't been really a real decrease in suicide, even though there's been like more resources that have been put out. So there's a lot of research being done on trying to figure out why that is. Because it's like resources have gone up and it's become less taboo, but the numbers are still staying steady. So there's a lot of research still looking into what is the cause of that. Because a lot of times money was going towards research on prevention, environmental factors, and things like that, even demographics. But what's causing this steady state and like lack of drops in certain areas?
So yeah, it's baffling in a way. And I mean, as a teacher to, high schoolers, I'm always going to be quick to say, oh, it's probably social media still is, you can't escape some trigger points, but then there's still, it's such a wide gambit of 10 to 34. You can't blame everything on social media. It's still around. In a way, I think you can escape it a bit more when you're in your 30s, but then there's other stuff too.
Well, what's the fascinating part? Well, it's not fascinating. It's unfortunate, but it's like the number for 85 years and older has actually went up with the last numbers that came out from the CDC,
Really?
which was 2023. Yeah, so their numbers have actually
Oh my.
went up substantially. And
Okay.
like a lot of that might be health factors and also loneliness factors, right? So a lack of community,
Yeah.
also feeling like they've been abandoned sometimes. So there's a lot of different elements with that age group. But I think you're you're very right on that. The age group that we're kind of focused on, which is the 10 to 34, I think a lot of it does have to do with social media. There's a lot of studies coming out with how social media is especially affecting the self-image and self-esteem of females, and especially young girls. It's also affecting males. Like so, with the studies, females tend to have more suicidal ideology, so they'll think about it a lot more. But the numbers for men are substantially higher. So even though men are 50% of the population, they're 80% of the suicide numbers. So we're talking like a 4-to-1 ratio.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's significant. So I guess with that discrepancy, I suppose it would be women kind of entertain the idea more, and then after a long period of entertaining it, then they act, whereas a man or a male, maybe I'm misreading it, will, when they decide or think about it, they act on it kind of a little bit quicker, I guess would be the case.
There's also women usually tend to have more of a community structure. So they usually tend to have a lot more closer friends and they're a lot more comfortable in dialoguing with them. While males usually tend to hide those kind of like issues because of, shame issues, masculinity issues, and also their idea of like, I need to handle it on my own, right? And I fell into the same trap during my time before. I refused to see, help for, what I went through with my loss, and it took, major thing happening or combination of things happening for me to finally realize that like I need to, I'm not gonna be able to do this on my own. So this is one reason why I think Grapple for Life and like the jiu-jitsu culture is so good, is because it does put you around a group of, it puts you into a community that gets really close. Like if you think about it, I'm sure some of your closest friends, I know some of my closest friends are all in the jiu-jitsu community, right? So
Yeah.
when you get put into that, it allows you to have that. And we can, and usually in jiu-jitsu, because it's such a close contact sport and there's so much stuff that goes on with it, you can tell when someone's having a bad day or when somebody is off. I can tell when one of my students is not being themselves for that week, and a lot of times that opens up discussion like, hey, what's going on, man? Like I noticed that you've been XYZ or something like that. I can even even some of my students will even realize when I'm having a bad week. They'll be like, hey coach, you seem a little off this week, everything good, and things like that. So, and I'm sure you've seen it, and I'm sure you've experienced it. And most people
Yep.
in the jiu-jitsu
Yep.
community can say that. So I think that's one reason why we've had such a high success rate with people that have entered our program and has been sponsored, especially the youth.
And that,
We've had great success, especially with our youth, and it's been amazing. It's been amazing. Like one of the biggest turnarounds was last year. It was a young girl that obviously for confidential reasons, I don't want to put out too much of the information like her name and stuff, but
of course.
we're talking about a young girl that was admitted twice, made attempts, that's had a major history, that has now gone a whole year without any backsliding, or she's actually got a job now. We've got kids that were like on the brink of dropping out of high school that have like graduated now, that are like entering college programs. So the success rate and what we've been seeing has been very successful.
Well, that's so wonderful. I know, oh goodness, you can't, yeah, you were referencing, you can't hide on the mat if you've got an off day or something. I mean, people real quick to be like, hey, everything all right? But I mean, and
Yep.
maybe that's just what makes, in so many ways, they say exercise is fantastic for your mental health. It is, you get the feel good natural high, but there's just something, it seems special about jiu-jitsu as opposed to, I've done Taekwondo, I've done other martial arts, but jiu-jitsu is one of those few things where maybe it's just, you can't let your mind go too much because you have to stay focused on the task at hand. And but then on top of that, it's that community of, we're all, in a way, we're all suffering together and we're all going to be there for each other. I don't know. It's just, it's powerful. I know there was a book I read, Trauma and Jiu-Jitsu, but it was talking about women getting into Jiu-Jitsu for PTSD after the fact of finding safe spaces, and that Jiu-Jitsu was very, very good at giving people a counter story. Right, you've been in these situations before, but now you can rise and you can be victorious. Just very, very powerful. And we've been talking so much about these scholarships and all the good that y'all are doing. Maybe this is a great time to quickly segue and then come back, but a wonderful event that I'm so glad that we're able to do for you, which is this roll-a-thon. Can you talk about what that's like? Not what it's like, because we haven't done it yet, but what it's going to benefit and all those wonderful things.
Yeah. So, like you mentioned earlier, this is kind of very interesting because this is, the way we met through Adina, which, I met her at at the DC forum through the AFSP. So this is where we were actually in DC, where we were advocating and talking to lawmakers for national policy changes. And that's where I met her. And then through her, I met you. And then, you came up with the idea for the roll-a-thon, which we've never done. Like we've done like seminars, and we've done Grapple for Life Invitational, where we have super fights and things like that. Where we make an event out of it, which is live streamed and things like that. So this roll-a-thon on the Saturday, the 28th of February, is basically it's a virtual, and wherever you're at, whatever academy, it could be your garage or wherever you train at, and you're gonna train for 2 hours. And what I would like to see is people being able to come out. I know you created some amazing paperwork and flyers. Who you're rolling for, it could be for yourself, it could be for a teammate, a family member. If you're comfortable sharing that information, why it's important to you, and then also the day of, like also getting on and putting some information out, videos of you training, and just making it a big community event, not just at one location, but as many locations as we can make it.
Because I know it's just, because when I heard about this foundation, when what you were doing with Grapple for Life, I was like, we need to let people know. I had no idea this existed. I've even told some of my students who have told me, this is students in the actual classroom, like, Miss Willis, I don't do jiu-jitsu, but it sounds like it'd be a really cool thing to be a part of. And it's just, I always want to stress to people, Jiu-Jitsu is for everybody, but maybe not every move is for everybody.
Yeah.
But it's a wonderful, wonderful community, and I just want to encourage people to promote your foundation, foundation, Grapple for Life, so that people know that it's there. That's the big thing. I know it's in West Virginia, but the way Adina was talking about it was, oh, it's right here, right next door in Alabama. And, she was making it sound like it was like you were here down south, which is why I was so confused when she said, oh, no, West Virginia. So, but wouldn't it be
Because
wonderful?
we've had,
So,
yeah, because we've sponsored people in like Virginia, Maryland, Tennessee, North Carolina. So yeah, we're based out of West Virginia, based off of this where I live. But in wise of like our outreach, it's everywhere. We're not limiting any of that. And kind of like you said, like jiu-jitsu is a very niche kind of sport. So we've also expanded. So for example, we had a young girl that we sponsored in Virginia, but because of health issues, because of prior knee issues, she couldn't actually do jiu-jitsu. But what we found out it was she could do boxing. So we got her into a boxing program. So we did get her into a
that's
program that was
awesome.
successful. So, and then we're also trying to expand because we're trying to expand into like, so for my daughter was really big into music. So I don't know where she got the musical talent from because it wasn't for me, I'll tell you that. But she was amazing at music, and then she became when she picked up the flute. I don't know, she like that was her thing. So she became very good at the flute. She actually still got the letter. She got selected to represent Washington State music on a tour in Europe.
wow.
But
That's
obviously,
awesome.
we lost her. Yeah. It was a letter from the governor that she was one of the selected for it. So we were actually trying to actually start a Riley Ann scholarship where we would actually like reach out to schools and maybe let music teachers kind of like put in a child that they feel like has got a great skill set, but maybe they don't have the financial means as a family to put in towards an instrument. Because there is musical instruments, especially like flutes or any type of brass, like they're extremely expensive, but the more silver content, like I learned a lot just based off of, my experience with
Yeah.
my daughter. But the more silver and like brass and all this other like content inside the instrument is going to make a big difference in like the sound. So a lot of families aren't going to be able to
Oh,
afford,
yeah.
this kind of stuff. So that's where we want to kind of help bridge the gap. But that's something that we're looking for, to down the road as we grow and like we can maybe start finding more corporate sponsors and things like that because that kind of funding, obviously we're going to need a big influx of donations prior to being able to
Yeah.
initiate something like that. As you also know that like us trying to, sponsor people and pay depending on the length of sponsorship, that adds up too. Because we also want instructors and academies to be able to keep their lights on. It's great because we do have instructors that would be like, hey, look, we'll do it for free or we'll just sponsor, you know, but we also understand, and me being an academy owner also know that, there's a financial burden to it. So we also want to make sure that people are able to keep the lights on.
Oh yeah, and I mean that's a beautiful thing. Where I love the fact that you're wanting to expand and to incorporate those passion parts of your story, and your daughter's story. I know I have a special heart and a place in my heart for music. I'm not musical either, but I have a lot of students who are, and they're very theatrical, and that's a great outlet for them. And so you can make music, through motion or music through old school music. And so just as long as I have found, and I don't know, maybe the research backs this up, but I feel like if you're if you are able to contribute something, if you're able to make something, maybe it's beautiful art, beautiful music, really cool jiu-jitsu moves, it feels like it gives you more of a purpose that I can do something. I'm not worthless. I can do something and contribute, as opposed to if you just sit down, and which is what I know. I'm sure I'm not the only one when I'm dealing with some bad depression, bad depression spell. I don't want to do any of that, right? I want to isolate. I don't want to make anything. I just want to sit under a rock and just never come out again. But the moment I start walking, the moment I get on the mats,
I'm so glad you brought that up, because physical fitness is a very underutilized aspect in mental health. Like, we know that it's good for you, but what people don't want to talk about is when you're actually in the grips of like depression, because I went through it myself. When you're in the grips of depression, the thought of getting up and even going to walk to your mailbox or go to the fridge to make something to eat can seem daunting. I remember, like, when I was going through my depression after my loss, the thought of getting up to brush my teeth and take a shower was too much. And now you're expecting that person to go out and go for a run or go work out. And this is where it's also extremely important to one of the biggest aspects I think that is not talked about is the community aspect. Because if you don't have people in your corner that are going to come to your house and like pull you out and actually drag you out or hold you accountable and being like, hey, look, we need to get you out. We need to get you back into class. Because a lot of times that's what you're going to need. That's what it took for me. I wasn't the one that decided, hey, I'm going to go to the academy and train today. It was a lot of my training partners that were like, dude, we're going to come get you. Like, we're going to go train. And like you mentioned earlier, like when I was training, because it's like an in the moment, in your face type sport, like it was the only time where I couldn't really think about what I was going through, because I was thinking about trying not to get strangled or not letting my guard get passed or trying to pass this individual's guard or whatever like that. So it was the only time where I actually had some sort of like mental peace, you know. And I think one of the biggest things that you just hit on also is the fact that too many people, especially young men nowadays, they do not have goals, they do not have aspirations, and they do not have something that's allowing them to feel like they're accomplishing something. Too many video games, too many screen time, not enough things that are getting them mentally stimulated. And physical fitness, and like it's different than physical fitness because there's a goal, right? There's progression, and you have like certain objectives that you're trying to meet. And it does, like you're saying, it's giving you a sense of accomplishment that you're not getting. And you're celebrating wins with your training partners, and you're also celebrating personal wins. And a lot of times when you combine that, all three of those aspects, that's what's allowing success. Because I know in our community, like sometimes we get kind of bullheaded and we won't take no for an answer. Like when you try to get someone to come train, sometimes you bug them so much you finally get them through the door. Because what you see a lot in mental health and suicide prevention, and I know this caused a lot of, I don't want to say it caused a lot of, but I bring up topics that sometimes people don't, because it's uncomfortable for people. But like one of the things I can't stand are people that just constantly put out like posts like, I'm here for you. Call me if you need something. Da 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 da. You know, it's like when people are in the grips of depression, they don't want to call nobody. What makes you think you're so special that they're going to want to call you out the blue when they're suffering from depression?
Yeah.
Right? So how about instead of you putting these dumb posts on your page, virtue signaling like, hey, look, I'm available for you. How about instead of doing that, how about you just go in and go talk to them? Or how about you go to their house? Yeah. You make the phone call if you notice something is going on. You go knock on the door. Hey, look, we're going to go have lunch today. Or, hey, look, where have you been in training? Let's go. Let's get your stuff packed. We're going to go to training today. You know, a lot of times we need to stop being the ones like, hey, raising your hand. Like I said, this whole virtue signaling thing is starting to drive me crazy. Because you always see it during the holidays. You always see it, especially when a community suffered from a loss. You're going to see these posts on people's walls that blow up, you know, and it gets very tiresome because like you yourself who have suffered, and who myself who has also suffered, and we continue to. Like I have my good days and bad days, and it's not like my loss is gone, right? So there are times where it's like, sometimes you need that person to knock on your door or get you out, right? Because like during those times, I ain't trying to call nobody. I'm barely keeping it together myself, let alone thinking about someone to call.
And that's just, and I think that's such a struggle for people in general, is having good, legitimate community. Just across the board, it can be
Yes.
very, so difficult because everyone's trying to play, as you were saying, that virtue signaling. But what I've noticed is so much of that virtue signaling and a lot of relationships that people have, it's still a relationship requires two people. It's a give and it's a take. And so often, I think now in our culture, it's so self-focused of what am I getting out of this? Is this serving me? And it's not, how can I, in a way, serve you? How can I love you? It's very much a one-way street. And so the moment, and I've noticed this in my own life, of the moment that you meet someone, that's the time that you're going to see who actually cares about you, as opposed to just is using you for whatever they want.
And you know, a lot of times, you know, and I know it came across harsh, but I know a lot of times people might mean well, but it's also sometimes not their fault because they're not understanding what like real, like everyone gets sad. So we're not talking about like, hey, look, you know, I'm just in a bad mood because the weather sucks or something like that. But when you're like in the grips of actual depression, it's a lot different than what people understand of trying to get back to a normal baseline. So the techniques of like getting into a good baseline from just being sad because you had a rough week compared to like you're going through like an actual mental health depression or crisis is completely different, and they need to be separated and they both need to be treated differently.
And I get, maybe I'm coming across a little too harsh on my end too, but it's just making the attempt, having somebody just making the attempt, someone signaling that they love and care about you in a physical way is huge. You know, I'm not a very touchy-feely person. I do not come from touchy-feely people. We do not hug that much. We don't kiss on each other. Meanwhile, my husband and his whole side of the family, they are huggers, they're cuddlers, and it's just like, it's a golden retriever versus a cat. It's just, it doesn't, but even, you know, having that physical touch is so important I find when I'm going through that severe dip of depression, just having human contact, actual physical human contact, it is everything. Because I don't know what it is, what it signals in our brain. I don't know the chemistry stuff, but it just means so much in those moments of physically being there from someone. I don't fault people who, you know, you have long distance friendships. The only thing they can do is be on the phone or a FaceTime. But there's something so special about having someone just attempt just to
You know,
show that
there is something very different about a phone call compared to a text, right? So there's a circle of guys that I routinely talk to every week, and it's always a phone call. Like we'll text each other, but when we seriously want to like have a conversation, it's going to be a phone call. And the reason being is there's a difference to that than a text, because a text can be so impersonal, right? You know, hey, I'm just checking in on you, right? It's very easy for that person to be like, I'm good, man. Thanks for texting, or thanks for checking in. And then that's it. While on a phone call, you really can't hide. So you have body language and you have paraverbals. It's very difficult for a person to hide the paraverbals, which is how you say something, compared to like body language, right? So like on the phone, when you actually hear them, if they come across like, hey, I'm fine, thanks for checking in, but they don't sound fine, they can't hide that, right? So then this is where you can start poking and prodding a little bit more, and maybe now is the time to go, hey, you know what, I'm going to come pick you up, or you can stay on the phone longer if it's a long distance thing. But if you're nearby, hey, look, let's go out and grab some dinner, or let's go grab some lunch, right? And getting them out of the house is a huge, like you saying, it causes like a switch to flip. One of the biggest things that you can give somebody that's going through depression or maybe an immediate crisis is time. So if you get them out of an element and you take them somewhere and you separate them from whatever mindset that they're in and you give them time, even if it's just sharing a meal, you'd be surprised what that can do in wise of. That's the biggest thing when it comes to like an immediate crisis is buying time.
Yeah.
So when you provide that time for somebody, it's huge. It's huge.
And I know it's it's, and I'm so happy that just us even talking about this is wonderful. And I know that time and just letting people know too that in this moment right now, if they're whenever they're watching or listening, that if they feel like they're going through something, they're definitely not alone. But what irritates me so much, and because I've been wanting to do something, just to make sure, keep all the cogs greased and all the gears turning right, because wanting to do checkups and such with mental health. But the fact that it's not covered on insurance plans and people having to pay out of pocket, and then some people can't afford it. Like that's why you have the scholarships for people to do jiu-jitsu, right? Because some people cannot afford it. Well, let's talk about how it's not affordable. There's no mental health care that seems to be affordable for everybody. Like, why is that not considered?
So that is actually,
I'll go off on that.
so actually that is something that we've been addressing at the state and national level. So for the last 2 years, that we've been dealing with legislation against insurance companies to treat mental health conditions just like you would a physical condition. So they would have to cover certain amount of like mental health treatment options, counseling, therapy. So this is something that the AFSP and other mental health organizations, along with Grapple for Life, has been going and fighting at the Capitol buildings, at the Hill, and making sure that the House bills and Senate bills that address these things are getting pushed, and most of them are bipartisan, which means both sides is something that they're wanting, right? So right now, there's been a great push where, like, yes, there's a big divide right now in politics, right? There's no hiding it. But in wise of like for mental health and suicide prevention, we're talking 95% of these type of bills that are being pushed have been bipartisan, which means both sides have been agreeing to it, which is very beneficial to get them passed on the floor on both sides before they can get signed off. So it is something that we are addressing. It's something that we're absolutely aware of. Yes. Yeah, so that is something we absolutely know that's been an issue, and something that has been and continue being addressed. And we're going to continue fighting until mental health and suicide prevention is treated just the same way as a physical health condition.
Because, if you don't treat, I know down here in the Deep South, we love our fried food, but if you don't treat your clogging of arteries, eventually you're going to have a bypass, or you may have a heart attack and pass away, much like if you don't get your mental health seen to. If you know there's a problem, it just starts, one of my favorite nasty words to use, but it's a great word, festering. Because you immediately picture all that nasty gunk building up, which is exactly what it is. If you can't, clean out that gunk, you're not going to be able to heal. You've got to, clean out the wound before you can stitch it up, right? Or you're going to, cause sepsis and you'll die.
One of my favorite lines, I actually use it quite a bit, not just in this field, but also when I'm teaching, is an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure. So if we can do preventative measures with something, I would much prefer that than trying to treat something that's already happened, right? So if we can get somebody into mental health treatment prior to now treating them inpatient because they made an attempt, one is obviously going to be something that we're going to push a lot more than trying to treat the aftermath. Let's try to get it before we get to that point.
Yeah, of course. It's with anything, like that's a great, an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure. That's really good. I mean, that's true for just about anything, not just, suicide prevention, exactly. Of course, but that's so true. And that's true. It's, I wouldn't ever allow a student to start writing a paper and I never correct, his grammar. Why would I, only correct him when he turns in the final thing? We do rough drafts. We talk about grammar and syntax and all that stuff so that, by the time he gets to writing the full paper, it's great. And there's not that much you got to change, hopefully. But yeah, that's so true. And I hope that, and I know public opinion, it seems to be swaying towards, well, let's get it covered. Let's get this done. So hopefully lawmakers, even down here in the Deep South, maybe something will happen to where, it starts getting covered. I know when I was growing up, I never thought that some laws would change on the books in regards to certain things, but they've changed. And so you never know what can happen. If there's enough public push for it, things can happen. Changing of tides can happen. So we'll see.
No, so this is like a great, also like if this is, you know, volunteers and like advocates are like a very big thing that help getting these types of bills passed. Like when we had a lot of House bills get passed when it came to like K through 12 schools, it wouldn't have been possible without volunteers and advocates, right? So like me being the public policy chair in West Virginia, I have like a great group of volunteers and advocates that come and meet with lawmakers. Like ours is like Wednesday, February 25th is this month. We're going to the state capitol and we're setting up meetings to talk about certain bills we were looking at getting passed. Also, like coming in May, we're going back to DC at the national level with a bunch of advocates from around the United States to push for national stuff. So this is stuff that we do yearly. And this is where a lot of like the funding also goes to, is because it's one thing to like talk about it, but when you actually go to the lawmakers and you start pushing it, and like the voting populace is the ones going and telling them, hey, look, this is important to us, and then you tell your story why it's important. Either, it could be because of a personal struggle, or in my case, a personal loss, and kind of putting some faces and on why it's so important. And a lot of times you can see like they've never thought about it, or they're learning something at that moment, that where you see it you'll see a shift, right, in how they look at it. And next thing you know, you're seeing people that normally might have not been something that they were looking into or voting towards, and now all of a sudden like they're now on your team supporting it. So this is where like if you want to help, like join and become a volunteer, become an advocate in your area, and kind of step out and do something bigger than just virtue signaling on social media.
Of course, of course. And just before we close, because I know we're a bit, don't want to take up too much of your time, but how can people get involved with not just, as you just said, with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, but what about with your foundation, with Grapple for Life? How can they get involved? I know we've got the roll-a-thon, but what can they do outside of that?
Yeah. So what I would go to grappleforlife.org. All right, so that's the website, and it just got updated. Get the word out. And also, like if you're an academy owner and you would like to host like a seminar, or you would like to, we've had people like book sales and things like that. We are happy to travel and like do all sorts of stuff. We've had people do like seminar events, get involved with the invitational, even volunteering in your area. And kind of like what you're doing, like where you're the one that, this is like the roll-a-thon was kind of like you kick that off. And this is the beauty of it, right? So this wasn't a Grapple for Life Gene idea, right? So this is where like other people come up with ideas that, I might never even thought about, or like my board maybe not have thought about. So this is like how they can get, people from the outside can get involved. Contact us, email us. Okay. All the contact information is at grappleforlife.org. You can email us. And then also, if you want to make substantial, even like going above and beyond that, is also like not just working with Grapple for Life, but get on like suicide prevention or like AFSP, and get on those websites and start volunteering locally at your areas at the state level, and then maybe eventually at the national level. So if it's something important to you, we'll make time for it, right? So there's all sorts of ways that people can help, even if it's just a sponsorship in wise of monthly donations, or like a corporate sponsorship, or corporate donations are something that help greatly, especially in wise of travel and like resources being made and mailed to mail to individuals or organizations. We've had like academies that'll be like, hey, can you send us resource materials for our people? We'll mail that kind of stuff because we want academies to be able to have resource materials on site. So if there is someone struggling there, they have resource materials. So we have resource materials for the general public, also first responders and veterans. So they have links for all sorts of different types of different links that might be more geared towards where you're suffering from. And then also on the website, we have a bunch of links for resources depending on what exactly you're going through.
Yeah. Well, that's so wonderful, and I'm so grateful, and I just feel so blessed having this conversation with you and getting this information out for anyone who needs to hear it and should hear it. And I'm hoping and praying that this roll-a-thon helps fund these scholarships and these programs for you. And just I'm very excited. I thank you so much for spending the time with me, talking with me about this important topic. So
Thanks for having me on, and really appreciate like you jumping on board and just like getting right after it immediately after like talking and meeting. And I love that kind of attitude and that go get 'em style. And we'd love to talk with you more and follow up down the road.
absolutely, yes, that's what you get when you get a type A teacher. You say go, I'm gone. So, but yes, can't wait to talk to you again, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. And again, thank you for sitting down with me.
No problem. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it and appreciate everything you're doing out in that area too.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.